Welcome, everyone, to Heads Together. I'm Bonnie Low-Kramen, and I'm here with my assistant, Jennifer Wilner, coming to me from New Jersey. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Bonnie. Coming from a very cold New Jersey. Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Yeah, here we are on Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. And Jen and I did our best today to show our Ukrainian colors.
Yes,
Um,
support.
it is impossible to do anything really these days without being mindful and watching the news and seeing what's going on in the Ukraine. Um, the horrors of what's going on in this war is almost too much to bear, and that's for us here, wherever you are, wherever we are. I'm in Florida, Jen's in New Jersey, and
Mm-hmm.
I realize that here I sit 6,000 miles away or so much from Ukraine, and yet it feels so present, in part because of the news. But it's hard to watch these images and to not feel like, what can we do to
Exactly.
help? So, welcome, Jacqueline. Jacqueline, oh, you're coming to us from London. Welcome. We're talking about what's going on in Ukraine, and Jennifer is in probably chilly Toronto.
Mm.
Hey, Anna. Yeah, it does affect everyone. Um, Jen, you had yesterday we had an interesting conversation online with a few assistants, uh,
Mm-hmm.
mostly from the United States, but one from Canada. And we were talking about how the events in Ukraine are impacting our lives right here, no matter where you're doing it, whether you're in California, New York, London. Really curious to know from you all here in the audience today how it's impacting your everyday life in your work. Want to welcome Denise and Marlene and Beth and Jen. It's so great seeing all of you. So happy we could all be together.
Mm.
Jen, you were sharing how the Ukraine events impacted you.
As far as, well, friends, local friends who I had no idea. I've known them for 5, 6 years. Never knew.
Never knew
Never knew. And they were, I
that
believe that
that's
they
where they're
were.
from.
Right, that's right. So they were originally, they would introduce themselves years ago that they were from Russia. Now they are making it very clear that they're from the
Yeah.
Ukraine.
So,
From Ukraine.
so Jen and
And
I, yeah. Oh, wow. And so now it's very much a topic of conversation. And you were telling me that you have neighbors who are Russian.
yeah, yeah. And we had a conversation with our dogs together, and like we would normally do, and just letting them know that we're thinking about them.
Yeah.
And they were very clear that they're okay, but they're not for this.
Yeah.
And their families are not for this.
So, yeah, that's so true. Yesterday on this meeting, that there weren't that many assistants on the call. One of them, based in San Francisco, said, well, her husband is Russian. And, you've probably heard that there has begun an anti-Russian backlash because of what's going on over there. And, it reminded me, and perhaps it reminded you all, of after 9/11 and how there was a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is that going to do to the dynamics? Um, I think I don't, often veer into politics on this show, but it seems important today to talk about the ways in which what's going on in Ukraine is impacting your work life wherever you are, whether you're in Frederick, Maryland, like Beth, or in Phoenix, like Anna. How is it impacting you all? Hey, Susan, welcome from New Jersey. Another example from yesterday's meeting is that our Canadian assistant colleague, her husband is going to be volunteering to go over and serve in the military there. So that is certainly going to be touching their personal life and impacting all of
Absolutely.
life.
Mm-hmm.
So Jen and I did our best to rebrand today in Ukrainian colors, in solidarity, because I'm admitting to all of you, I'm sitting here thinking, well, what can I do? What
Right.
can we do to help? Um, And of course, you can donate money. That is certainly something you can do. And yesterday, I was so pleased that our colleague, Lucy Brazier from London, gave a really interesting post on LinkedIn. And Jen, you have that link, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jen's going to post in the chat the link that Lucy Brazier, who's the publisher of Executive Support Magazine, she posted about the different charities that you can donate to. She was saying how in her office they're going to be doing a bake sale and proceeds are going to go to Ukraine, because if you've seen any of the images, people are leaving as refugees with one bag. And I mean, we can all imagine what that would feel like. I hope we'd never know from that. But can you imagine trying to leave your home with one bag?
Only imagine. Yeah.
Feels really crazy. So wondering if any of you have had this Ukrainian crisis touch your work, if you're willing to share in the chat. If not, we certainly respect your privacy. But it felt really important to address what's happening and to say that we at Heads Together want to help in sharing information that is important to the community. We know that there must be assistants who are in Ukraine who, my goodness, are being impacted in a huge way. So we want to be responsive to those needs. And if any of you know of something that needs to be broadcast out to the community, I'm willing to say that Jen and I will be happy to do that. Right, Jen?
Absolutely.
We'll be on that. Just as Lucy Brazier has been so generous in sharing great information with how we can help, that we can all help even by sharing information. Karina, welcome from Luxembourg, and Lynn from Fort Myers, Florida. See, we're from all over the place. And I, as so many of you have been a part of BTUA, it doesn't matter where we are, that these events that are happening all over the world have impact. We're seeing it, prices at the gas tank. That has a direct correlation. Jen, Linda Boulay. Hi, Linda. Linda has something to share.
Wow, that came really fast. Hey, Linda. I remember years ago, excuse me, walking down the street in Moscow when two young men came up to me and started talking. Somewhere in the conversation, I said something about them being Russian. I was immediately corrected by both that they were not Russian, but Ukrainian.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a map, I've had to, thankfully, Google helps you really fast with maps, and to see where, why these refugees are going to particular places. Susan has a comment, Jen.
Susan says, we have a team member whose family is in the Ukraine, and so far our team member has been able to communicate with family members via texting. We are offering support daily to our team member and their family.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Thanks, Susan, for that. And we have Marion from Wellington, New Zealand. We have people from all over the world today. And how fitting that we can have this international gathering online. One of the very interesting things that I heard on the news was about, how news is getting to the Russian people because, Putin, just going to call him P because I don't even like to say the name. He's trying to control what Russian people know. And, thankfully, Robert's a techie, and so I learned so much from him, is that one of the ways that is different now in 2022 is because of VPN lines, where the server can think it's in another country and not Russia. So I don't think any longer communication can be, stopped so easily as it was many, many years ago.
Right.
Yeah, Karina, national identity is so important. Yeah, it's another thing that's interesting are the leadership lessons we're getting from this, that I couldn't help but think, and many of you know I talk a lot about bullying. And it seems to me that one aspect of what we're seeing is what happens with a bully who's out of control, who is not held accountable for many, many years. And don't we all see examples of this in a much smaller way in our companies? And is it not true that sometimes a bully is permitted to keep doing what he or she is doing without being held accountable? I think there's something valuable to be learned from that. I also think there's something valuable to be learned from how I see President Zelensky conducting himself as he's going in front of cameras. And boy, how savvy was he to quote Winston Churchill in front of British Parliament yesterday. But the whole notion of him as a leader being transparent and sharing honest truth with the Ukrainian people and with the world, I think there's something valuable to learn from that kind of transparency too. Karina is saying, is in Luxembourg, and the Russians think they're just doing military exercises. Right. I don't think they're going to be kept from the truth for very long, is what I hope. And I'm an optimist, but that's what I'm hoping. Hello, Barbara from Michigan, Minnesota? Am I? Michigan. Beth has a comment, and then Anna does.
Beth is saying, not affecting my work. However, I have neighbors, friends, and a coworker that I've reached out trying to show my support. They are from Ukraine and nearby Slovakia and Romania. So fearful for their families. Yeah.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, we're, even if it's not touching our families, it's, you don't have to look very far.
You don't.
What does Anna have to say?
We were at home 2 years ago and now returning to work, driving our cars and having gas sticker shock. Yet this is nothing compared to what others are going through, leaving husbands and sons behind to keep their freedom.
And these trains and buses are filled with women and children because their husbands and sons are being drafted. What I read is that men age 18 to 60 are being drafted into the military. So, there's a lot to be learned here. And my goodness, I think we're all in agreement. We want this to be over really quickly. And I think I said it last week. I keep wondering who in the world are assisting P. Who are assisting him? Who's assisting him? Anyway, so those women and children are leaving, and so what is Bobby Dean? Hi, Bobby Dean.
Wow. Bobby says that more than 2,000 Russian soldiers have died that will filter throughout the Russian Empire.
In this conflict so far? Is that what you're saying? I mean, any death, it just feels so senseless, so senseless. Linda is sharing. And I think this is important to do. If you can put that up on the screen, we as assistants, we're from all over the world, and how interesting to be able to share information in this way. So I hope you're all cool with it, because I think this is great.
So Linda read this from one of her former colleagues who shared an article from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists by Rose Guttenmoller. Okay. Fits with Bonnie said about bullies. The global bully in 2007, P, as we're calling him, brought his black lab Coney into a meeting with Angela Merkel because he knew she was deathly afraid of dogs. She was indeed frightened, visibly so, and he thus solidified his reputation as a bully. As Merkel commented at the time, I understand why he has to do this to prove he's a man. Do we need to know anymore?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Wow. So we need to take a lesson about bullies here. If there's, in our own organizations, in our own departments, if there's a bully there, it certainly makes a good case why we have to call them out early and not let it spin out of control. And Bobby Dean is saying, yes, that those 2,000 Russians, they can't hide this. Yeah, it's impossible to hide. So an interesting point, Linda, about, a man using that tactic. This is Women's History Month. Yesterday was International Women's Day. And we're seeing the faces of women all over the news, these brave women, many of them mothers and grandmothers, who are being called to do things that they shouldn't ever have to do, but there it is. Jen and I had talked about wearing purple today in the month of March, because of purple is one of the colors for Women's History Month. But it felt more important today to deal with Ukraine and to talk about it. I think one of the ways we as a community, all of us, everyone on this call, me and Jen, we can help by talking about it, by not shoving it under the rug, by not looking the other way. And that goes for the bullies in our environment, the sexual harassers in our environment. I think one of the things this situation is highlighting is how much we need each other. Certainly during Women's History Month, I love to make the case that we as women need each other. But the absolute truth is that the most positive changes are going to happen when we collaborate strongly with men. So Bobby Dean and Karam and all the men who are listening today and here with us, this is not women versus men, men versus women. It shouldn't be. It really needs to be a collaboration. And that is something that I'm going to say as long as I have breath in me to say. Karina has something to share.
Karina shares that it's true. However, Russia's neighboring countries have been through a nuke accident, Chernobyl, and nobody wants that. And that's not going to be an accident this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say our Canadian assistant was deeply concerned about that. And as am I, any thinking person, because again, everybody on this call understands probably, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I know you will, we know what it feels like to be in the midst of an irrational leader. If there's anyone have you, Jen? Have you been around people who've been irrational and not thinking?
Unfortunately, at a very young age, unfortunately.
Not thinking straight, not thinking logically. Right. And of course, I guess that's a judgment, not thinking rationally, but it seems pretty clear that P is not thinking rationally, and irrational people behave in erratic and irrational ways. So I just want to take some lessons here about what we as support staff, we as people in support of leaders, how we can be influential along the way before it gets to escalate into a really intense and serious life or death situation. You wonder what's next, Anna, for sure. Yeah, Dusty Klesner, welcome, Dusty. He's teaching us others what not to do. And there's value there too, I would say, especially when things are safer. This feels very dangerous. And I'm, on one level, I'm just grateful that we are in a place in America where, Jen and I have access to our internet, and you all do too. And we have a way of coming together and just speaking our minds and saying what we think. And I'm very grateful for that. And certainly not taking that for granted as you watch the news and see that not everybody in the world has that. If any of you have any information that needs to be shared into the bigger community, I mean, you certainly have the ability to share on LinkedIn or however you choose to. But I'm certainly willing to communicate and share data that is valuable to the larger community wherever you are. We've got people on the call today from Europe and even as far as New Zealand. So Jen, if you can put up that link again in the
Yes.
chat about Lucy Brazier sharing places to donate. I'd like to turn the conversation to women, since it is International Women's Day yesterday and Women's History Month. I am happy to say that in the work I'm doing, I'm seeing some progress when it comes to the empowerment of women inside companies, the move towards, and involving it in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So women tend to be a part of that group. And so we're seeing a bigger attention on making salaries more fair. And I certainly have seen a trend of holding bullies more accountable. Certainly interested in any of your feedback about what you're experiencing at your company about initiatives for women right now. Are they happening? Are we going forwards? Are we going backwards? This is all in the landscape of the Great Resignation. So I'm still hearing about lots of jobs that are going unfilled. So it would seem logical that companies are looking to hold on to their high producers, many of whom are women. So eager to know what you're thinking about that, if there's any input that you have. On one hand, companies are in HR and leaders, they are scrambling. In the aftermath of the pandemic, there are so many things that are screaming for attention. Diversity, equity, inclusion is one of many. So, it begs the question that if companies are not moving fast enough to encourage and empower women during this Women's History Month, what then is our move? What then can we do? And I believe the answer to that is we need to do it for ourselves, that we need to be overt about support for each other, women helping women, men being what I refer to as man ambassadors, and being supportive of women in our workplace as we try to figure out what this new thing is that we're creating in this workplace, in this post-pandemic workplace. So certainly eager to know any feedback that you have about what's happening for women at your company. If that's something you want to talk with me about offline, Bonnie at BonnieLow-Kramen.com. So while you might be typing or not, I had something exciting happen today. I'm working with a publicist as part of the new book, and I submitted an article as a part of that initiative. I submitted an article that I wrote called, to a magazine, an online magazine called CEO World. So theoretically, it's all CEOs and high-level executives who read this magazine. So I wrote an article called Executives, It's Time to Lose the Guilt. Jen, you are going to put up the link for that.
Yeah.
Hot off the presses, like a few hours. It came out of a conversation I had with several executives who admitted that they feel guilty asking their assistants to do things for them.
Crazy.
I'm like, what? Out of all the complaints and all the feedback I hear from executives about their work with assistants, I really hadn't heard very much about them feeling guilty. But the more I asked, the more they said, oh yeah, I feel guilty, so I do it myself. And I quote one of the executives. He said that his wife even said to him, why are you asking your assistant to do it? Why aren't you just doing this? And that just made me a little crazy, because assistants are hired specifically to be supportive of their executives. So it seemed crazy. We have a few comments.
Yes.
That,
Didn't want to interrupt you. LinkedIn user, thank you. We had our second annual Orlando Magic Game Change Hers Summit yesterday. It was phenomenal. That's
oh, yay.
fantastic.
Invite me next year. That sounds so awesome. Okay, so what?
Fantastic. Susan said she read the article.
Oh,
so
thanks,
very well
Susan.
written.
Thanks. You're such a huge fan. I appreciate that. It just blew me away that not one, not two, not three, but more executives feel guilty about using you. Like, what? That just is illogical. But then made sense when we hear from assistants who say, you know what, I'm going to look for another job. I'm not being fully leveraged. They don't know what to do with me. So it might be worth a conversation if you're experiencing any of that to say to your executive, you know, it's cool to ask me to do these things, right? And, Jen and I, we check the metrics on my website often, right? Mm-hmm. Jen, do you remember what one of the top articles is that keeps getting, do you know the one?
What would you do if you were CEO for a day?
Well, that's like the number 2 most popular. The first one that I wrote a few years ago, you remember what it is now.
Things that you should and shouldn't ask your assistant to do.
Yeah, I wrote an article called The 31 Things You Can Ask Your Assistant to Do and a Few You Shouldn't.
You shouldn't, right.
And that continues to be consistently like the number 1 article from my blog. So please Google that, or Jen, if you can, you probably can find it really fast and put that in the chat. So LinkedIn, Dr. Keita Ivy, Keita Joy, I should check her out. What does Anna have to say?
Anna saying, even if you don't know someone, we're going back to the conversation.
Please. We're multitaskers.
Yeah, no problem. Even if you don't know someone personally who has Ukrainian family, besides gas, people are holding back buying larger purchases because of rising food, car, housing, etc. costs. We've had great support for women. That's why I stay. My leader will not let me get coffee, but definitely wants opinion and doesn't turn down my assistance with strategic items.
Bravo, Anna. And I hope you didn't have to fight too hard. If we were talking, I'd be wanting to know, how long you've been working together. Was it like that from the beginning? Or did you have to train him or her? This is a two-way street. This is a process. But I wrote this article about the guilt because I realized that I don't think this is a commonly known phenomenon out there. So Anna, you've been there over 4 years. Cool. And I'm just curious if you want to share, has it been like that from the beginning where he was asking you your opinions and things like that, or did you have to train them? And thank you, LinkedIn user, for submitting my name for next year, if that feels right to you. Susan has something to say.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Susan. As an assistant, I'm always hungry for more to do. I can do more than schedule meetings, answer phones, and handle emails. Talk to me. See what interests me and what else can I, your assistant, take on.
There you go, Susan. And Susan, I happen to know you've been doing this for a long time. We've had you here on Heads Together, so the world knows that you've been doing this work for over 20 years. I don't think you would think that's a state secret. And so I hope that if this article about executives feeling guilty resonates, maybe you'll give it to these executives and say, can you read this? Is this something that you're feeling? Can we talk about this? It would be a way to open up the conversation. It takes time for trust to build. Oh, absolutely it does. And it's especially hard if an executive has gotten burned in the past or feels that they've been burned. Diane has something to say.
Diane, mine feels guilty because I take on many projects, sees that I'll work late into the evening and don't take time off. I have to remind him that I love what I do. And when I don't have projects, etc., I get stir crazy.
Well, Diane, that's an interesting perspective. I just hope that when you finally do decide that you're tired, that that it's easy for you to take off, and no guilt. And that, because a lot of assistants feel guilty if they don't take work home at night or on vacation and things like that. So I think we need to address the issue of guilt from all sides, from the executive side, from the assistant side. And Bobby Dean has a comment.
PA world. Wish they felt guilty over how much they want house managers to do.
Isn't that the truth, Bobby Dean? Bobby Dean comes from the world of private service. And those are the people who support the high net worth folks of the world in their homes. Officially, I could have been termed private service. I was a private service professional supporting Olympia Dukakis out of her home. And when you're working out of someone's home, it's just too simple to have the boundaries just get so blurry because there's no separation. And it really requires a very intentional boundary building. And it's a skill which needs to be taught. And I certainly try to do that every chance I get. Anna says, I make sure I have a backup. No guilt here. I've earned my time off here. Yes. And the truth is that executives, when they leave to go on vacation, now, if they choose to do work on vacation, that's their choice. But chances are you've got their back, and they don't have to do work if they don't want to, because you are covering them. Our LinkedIn user says,
oh, it was Stormy. Hey, Stormy.
Hey.
I feel well and respected, and am frequently asked my thoughts, opinions, and input.
Yeah. In these articles, I often say how you all are the chosen ones, that the staff of our workplace are you're a natural resource. You're already on the payroll. And so to not fully leverage you is really short-sighted and not really smart, because you're already being paid for what you know. How about we ask you what you know, your opinions, your feedback, your input, your concerns? It just makes sense to do that. Well, as we wrap up today, I hope you'll check out the article on the guilt. I hope you will certainly send positive thoughts and energy to our friends and colleagues in Ukraine as they fight a battle that they never thought that they would have to do. And also our hearts go out to the folks in Russia who didn't sign up for this. Who among us can't relate to that feeling of being in a situation and thinking, I didn't sign up for this. How did I get myself into this situation? So this, as crazy as it is, it feels quite relatable. And let me reiterate, let us stand up to the bullies of the world and not allow them to get out of control. It's dangerous. I hope you will be with us next Wednesday, March 16th, when we will have a special guest, a very special guest who is a LinkedIn expert. More about LinkedIn. We can't have too much about it because the platform is so important to the profession, and also it's changing by the day. So it's important to stay up on the latest and the greatest. I love seeing all of your names and having you here from all over the world. Thank you for being here and for caring to come together week after week to just put our heads together. And on one level, that can be enough sometimes, is to just know we're not alone in what we're dealing with. If any of you have input for me privately, Bonnie@BonnieLow-Kramen.com. Jen, thank you so much for all of your help, as always.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And I'm wishing all of you a very safe rest of the week. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
See you next week, everyone.